Today we have a session on how's your financial literacy that is going to be presented by Betty Gasquey and Judy Hicks. Betty and Judy are a pair that have presented together and individually for many years at national conferences, regional conferences, T-Cubed international conferences. They're great with the TI technology, and they've been working on some new financial literacy activities for us, and they're going to share some of the things that they have learned, and I am going to step aside and hand it over to them now. Thank you.
Thanks, Dale.
I'm going to go ahead and share my desktop, and so happy to be with all of you today. And first of all, we want to talk a little bit about our objectives for today and our agenda, and we will be looking at some wonderful resources at the TI website. But we do plan to do a subset of some new activities that have been posted there recently. And as you can see, many of them do involve money, financial literacy. And some of these we had not done on the calculator or the TI-Nspire before, 84 or Nspire, and we'll use both of those platforms today, kind of going back and forth with the different activities. So let's take a minute to go to the website. I know this is your favorite website, education.ti.com, and see where you can locate these financial literacy activities. And if you go over to the educators section, and I went to education.ti.com, and then down to the educators tab, and right in the center of the new financial literacy resources. So Judy, where should we go first here?
Well, I say let's just scroll down and see what's all on here. Maybe pointing out a few things as we go. So as you can see, there's lessons that we're going to look at a few of these today. There are a couple of videos. That's what's in the middle there on the how-tos. So you can also, if you forget how to use something, these are really good videos from Australia, actually, I believe. Hopefully I'm saying where they're from correctly. And for both the 84 and the Nspire. So they're pretty short, and one's like 4 minutes and one's like 6 or 8 minutes. So you could even use these with your students. And then I want you to go back, Betty, if you would.
And here are wonderful lessons. There are 13 lessons, and they're done for both platforms. Again, the TI-84 Plus CE and the TI-Nspire CX2 technology. And as you can see, we're looking at all sorts of things we want our students to learn about that will be helpful to them as they become adults and make decisions even as students, and also in the future. It goes all the way through even depreciation and amortization, some things we hadn't thought about. Sinking funds sounds kind of exciting. And again, we're going to give you a flavor of many of these activities today as we go through different ones. There are also some other resources here in addition to the lessons and the how-tos under professional learning. So be sure when you have a chance to check this out. There have been some webinars already on financial literacy, a blog, and then there's this next generation professional finance. Let me get that right. Next generation personal finance.
Personal finance.
As activities as well using TI calculators. So many, many new resources here we wanted to share with you.
Now, according to that site, to the next generation personal finance, there are approximately 23 states that are in the process right now of requiring some sort of financial literacy. So we would like you to answer in the chat, whether you know it or not, you might not know it. Does your school or school district have financial literacy courses? And include your state if you would. So make sure you're chatting to everyone. Yes, Vermont. Yes. Oh, not anymore, California. Okay, so we're getting, they're whipping by here pretty quick. So there are different things going on in different states. Now, one thing I found interesting, because I did the same thing. I'm from Colorado, and I searched on, my education website, and some of the literacy is in math and some is in social studies. And I didn't take the time to see the difference yet as to what is where. But anyway, so that's kind of interesting what the different states are doing. And some states too are just in the process of saying, okay, in 2024, this is going to happen. And again, some, as you could maybe see on the chat, some it's a separate course, some it's in separate, as part of math, part of whatever. So, okay. Now, another thing we would like you to let us know in the chat, have you used the Finance Solver on the 84 or on the Inspire? Nope, 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 nope. There's a yes. All right, we got a couple of yeses, but a lot of no's. Great. You're at the right place then.
Okay, great. Now, those of you who have used the Finance Solver at all, you may have done some activities similar to the first two we're going to do today, but we wanted to start with these because students are very conscious of things related to automobiles. So we're going to look at a couple of activities related to that, and we will be going back and forth, as I said, between the Inspire and the 84, but we're going to start with the Inspire. But let me let you look at this question, and then when I switch to the software for the TI-Nspire CX, Judy will remind us of the components of this particular problem.
We decided, because we're using so many different things here, that it'd be better if just one person is kind of controlling this. So that's why Betty is saying, so take a second, read this, and then I'll remind you of it. So we're buying a car, and they don't want to make more than, monthly payments of $500 for 6 years. Yikes. With an interest rate of 7.5. And yes, we are going to be doing this on both Inspire and 84, but we won't always be doing every single example on both.
Yes, and most of them, the things we do are almost exactly the same on those platforms. There are a few exceptions, and we'll point those out as we go along. So I'm going to go to the TI-Nspire. I've opened a new document.
Sorry, Betty. So Jay Watson, I'm sorry. If you want to have your 84 out while we're doing this, then you might be able to follow along even though we're doing it on Spire.
But we will be doing an 84 activity very similar to this in just a few minutes.
Yep.
So if you first start your TI-Nspire and you're on the home screen, for example, you would want to open a new document. I'm choosing one for a new document. And we're going to add a calculator page. Sometimes I think people don't realize the Finance app is actually here because it's not one of those choices that you make when you add a new page. So we added a calculator page. So we're going to go to Menu and to Finance. When I'm sharing with students, I always arrow to the choice that I'm going to make because we know how visual they are. And if we choose Finance, notice there are lots of different things here besides just the Finance Solver. That is a time value of money solver. So we have the time value of money functions. We'll look at some of these later. Amortization, we'll definitely do that later. And other things that are related to money. So we're going to start with the Finance Solver.
Betty, do we want to change settings first?
Oh, good thought. When we do this, we often want to deal with money. So what we would like to do is think about our rounding. So I'm going to press escape because we needed to share that with you regardless of how to get out of the finance solver once you're in there. And I'm going to go and click on this little icon, your battery icon. You can also get to your document settings back on the home screen. And when I click here, that's a nice quick way to get to the document settings. Notice that the factory default for the display digits is float 6. And thank you, Judy, for that good reminder. So we're going to change it to fix 2, so it will show 2 decimal places for our money activities. And we'll just leave everything else alone. And by the way, for those of you who use the Nspire a good bit, this fix 2 is not going to impact the display digits on the graphs page. There's a different settings in the menu for the graphs and geometry pages. So we'll choose OK here, or we can tab to OK, either way, and select it. So now we go back to finance again. So menu, good to remind us where that is. And again, I'm on a calculator page. Choose finance, and we'll go into our finance solver. Now, one thing we especially wanted to do first is notice with the TI-Nspire, right here when I'm on the row N, that says that's my number of payments. Tab is very important with Nspire when we're moving from row to row. If you press enter or the arrow keys, things may happen that you didn't really want to happen. So tab is your friend here. We have our interest rate, and we do not have to convert it to a decimal. If it's 7%, we just put in 7. Present value, payment, the future value, the payments per year, compounding periods per year, and whether the payment is made at the beginning or the end of the period, the payment period. And we do want to stress that end is the default, but you may change it to the beginning of the period if you choose to. And we'll look at the difference between those as we go along. So I'm going to continue to tab, and now I'm back up here at the front. So Judy, if we're making monthly payments, maybe we better think in terms of months here.
Right. And we have this person, this professional, young professional, it was 6 years. So let's think about the months for that.
And one of the videos I watched at the financial literacy website was saying, let's remind students 6 years times 12 payments per year. And notice when I press tab, that will compute that for us.
Interest rate of 7.5.
Okay, 7.5. And if I tab, notice it put the 0 there.
Okay. And again, the card payment is for 500. So the present value, we're not going to do anything with, and we're going to go down to payment. Because we are giving money away, so to speak, it's a negative.
And be sure to use the negative here. On one of the videos, it mentioned if you're giving money to the bank, negative. If they're lending money to you, positive. So thinking in terms of that with the students.
And at the end of this loan, there will not be any more to pay. So the future value is 0. The payments per year was 12. And the compounding was 12.
So we're going to go ahead and tab, and we're trying to solve for the present value. That would be the amount the young professional can borrow with these payments at that interest rate for 6 years. And notice here the directions, press enter to calculate. So all we have to do is get on the row for which we would like to solve and press enter. And if I press tab just to move away from that, you can see it rounded to 2 decimal places. So 29,000 approximately is this car. And I think that might be surprising to some students that they're paying this large a payment for that long a period of time. Think about it now. If you were doing this same activity with your students and you want them to pose a different question that's similar, but just a little bit different twist to this, what else could we explore related to this type of car loan? What changes might you think they would suggest we make?
Put it in the chat, please.
Anything students might be curious about with this same type of thing, if they're interested in having a car at some point? Different loan period. Okay, great.
Good.
Reduce the payments.
Yep.
So with this technology, it is just so nice that we could change the loan period. Perhaps it's 5 years. Great responses coming in. And coming in, and notice here, if we changed it to this many years, they could only buy a car that costs that much. What if you wanted to pay a higher amount, someone said? And
Putting a deposit down, and grandma steps in and says,
Yeah.
here, put this towards
there
your
you
car.
go. So again, it's so easy to make these conjectures, the what ifs, and almost immediately find out the answers to your what ifs. And we are absolutely going to do an 84. So we want to make sure that we encourage students to conjecture and also let them do some research. Several people said different loan rates. It's amazing the variety of loan rates right now, because of course it depends on whether used car, new car, credit rating, and on and on and on. So this is just really fun for students to make conjectures, and it brings in a lot of mathematics, as you'll see as we go along, other than just the interest of what's going on in the real world. No pun intended with interest there. Okay, we're going to press escape just to leave it.
One quick thing too.
Okay.
Colleen asked why the PV wasn't negative, because you're borrowing so much money, and at the end you don't owe anymore.
And so if you're giving money payments to the bank, they are, you're actually have this much value. So it's always going to be the reverse. Okay.
For this.
And we'll look at another example very similar to this, where you'll see that even more clearly. Thanks for bringing that up, though.
We're going to do this one on the 84.
Okay, so this next one we're going to look at with the 84 is very, very, very similar. We wanted it close to the same, but this one is about a college student wanting to buy a car. So what we're missing this time is the payments.
They know how much money that they want to buy, or, you know, the price of the car, but what would the payments be for 5 years at 11%?
And it is a used car. Okay, so we're going to go to the TI-Nspire software, and I'm just on the home screen of the Nspire for those of you who've used the Nspire a good bit. And Judy was a good reminder last time. I'm going to try to remember it myself this time. I'm going to go to mode and change the decimal setting to 2, and that will round it to 2 for our money. 2 places. And this just go back to the home screen. And the finance app is the top app, not alphabetical. It is not cleared when you clear the other apps for testing. So we will choose the finance app from the list of applications. And as you can see, there are lots of things here. The TVM is similar, really exactly the same as the finance solver we used on the Nspire. It's just called TVM for time value of money. And then we have many other options here, some of which we'll look at as we go along today. There are also some variables. And once you have done a calculation in the TVM solver, those values are stored in these variables, and you can access them if you need them. So first of all, we'll choose TVM solver. And notice it looks very much like what we just saw. And in this particular one, Judy, I think he was financing for 5 years. Is that correct?
Correct. So
and making monthly payments. So we'll go ahead and put in 60.
Yep, and
Here
11%.
You can arrow down. Again, we do not have to convert to a decimal. All right, so the bank is lending him money. He wants to buy the car at $19,000, and think about that money coming to the student. And then the payment is what we do not know. Future value of the loan should be 0 because he's going to be paying it back. We have 12 payments per year with that same compounding periods. So what we want to solve for is our payment. And if you notice right above the enter key, I think someone put that in the chat, there's a little solve button in green. So we press alpha followed by enter. And there are the monthly payments.
And again, it's negative because this is what he or she, whichever, will be paying to the bank.
So out of pocket to that person for the loan, the money that came to him to buy the vehicle. Now, one thing that I found kind of interesting when I first showed this finance solver to a group of students, they got a little bit angry, not at me, but at the whole process of how much money had to be paid back for this particular loan. And Judy and I thought this would be a good time to talk about that and also show how these variables can be used. Obviously, students could write down $413.11 for their loan monthly payment. But if we go back to the home screen, keep in mind these have been stored, go back to the home screen and then go back into our apps. I just went to the home screen to make sure it had been cleared out from anything I may have done previously. And if we go over to our variables, notice that I've got N for the number of payments in case I forgot that. I've also got the payment amount. So students could choose the payment amount, multiply by 60 if they remember it was 60 payments. And that's the amount that the person is paying back to the bank. So let me repeat that. We just go back to apps, back to finance, go over to our variables. And if I wanted to do it a little bit differently, I could say the number of payments in multiplied by, back to apps, finance, variables, and the payment. So there are multiple ways this could be done. They could multiply the payment times 5 times 12 and get the same thing. But what was really interesting is, if you think about it, the $19,000 that was borrowed, the difference between that and what was being paid back is $5,700.86, $57.86 and 36 cents, which kind of seems a huge proportion compared to what was borrowed. And I think sometimes this is a shock to students. So what we hope that maybe you would put in the chat, do you think most of your students are aware of how much interest they actually will be paying back on car loans or when they buy houses or condominiums? You think
and if they've got, now kids maybe don't have this yet, but if they end up with a poor credit score at some point, yikes.
Yeah. And someone even said a lot of adults may not be. So
right?
if I grab this interest amount, for example, and divide it by the amount that's actually being paid back, so the interest amount divided by the amount that's being paid back, interest plus principal, is a pretty good chunk, 23% approximately. That's rounded, of course. So it's really kind of a shock to some students, and it's a good thing for them to learn about, obviously, when they're in high school and before they are making some of these decisions. When I was talking to a banker yesterday, asking him about something, I was telling him about these activities, and he said he did wish that his younger children would have access to this information as they move through school, because he would certainly try to share it with them. And how shocked that people were that if they wanted to only make a $400 payment, for example, which is approximately this payment, then they didn't realize how little bit of a car price they could get at that much of a payment. So remember, we were borrowing $19,000 and paying back over $400 a month for 5 years. So it's a good bit. Now, some of you may have seen the finance app, and we'll revisit it in different forms today, and we think it's really wonderful. But one other thing we wanted to share with you that we can do on both platforms, even though it's a little bit different on the Inspire than it is on the 84. I'm going to go back to first of all, clear the screen just so that we'll have some space to work, and go back again to this app. All of our data is still in there. And notice down here under the calc options, we have a balance option. What if I wanted to know the balance on this loan after the first year or after the second year or so on? Now, a lot of times when you choose these variable options, you may not be aware of the syntax. I certainly was not. So one thing Judy and I have really been dependent on as we've gone through these activities is looking at the catalog. If you go on the 84 to second, followed by the 0, here's the catalog. Go down to the B's very quickly. Since the little alpha lock is also on, we will press the B for letter B, and there's balance. Now, the TI-84 and the TI-84 plus CE and several of the more recent calculators, you can just press the plus key, and there is your catalog help. On the older calculators, you need the app called Catalog Help, and you need to run that app, and then it will work the same way as this. And there is that app on the TI website available for the a little bit older 84s, Catalog Help. So this says I need the number of payments, and anything in a bracket is optional. Well, we've already set it around to 2 decimal places, so we don't have to worry about that. If I did not already have balance on the home screen, I could choose the key under paste, which is trace, but I already have it, so I will just pay attention that I need the number of the payment, and I'll press the key under escape, which is graph. So the balance at the end of the, oops, I chose it twice. The balance, might as well go back to the catalog and grab it now. And back to B again. So our balance at the end of the first year would be balance after 12 payments, because it said in payments. And then what if we wanted to look at the balance at the end of 2 years? Now there's a real mathematical reason for doing this, because we all love our math and we want to think about some things. Look at how much that dropped from the end of the first year to the end of the second, maybe about $3,300. And of course, we know the balance at 0 would have been 19,000. So from 19,000 down to about 16,000, it dropped about 3,000. And if we look at 3 years, where I'm heading here, which many of you are thinking, is it linear? It's dropped. Well, from 19,000 down to about 16, we dropped about 3,000, but then we dropped about 3,200. Now we've dropped what, maybe about 3,800, and we could do that subtraction, of course, if we wanted to. But we want kids to think about constant rate of change. Is there a constant rate of change in the balance owed year after year? And if they look at the mathematics here, we see there is not a constant rate of change. It just dropped 4,200. Here it dropped 33. Think about why that's happening. It's not linear. The balance owed. That would be interest and principal, of course. And we've got the compound interest going on.
Yep.
Many of you who have looked at your amortization for your home loans, you know what's going on with the interest. It's being front loaded. So this is really kind of neat for kids to see numerically, but we can also let them look at that. And again, the command's a little bit different here with the Nspire, but the activity on the website for the Nspire gives the explicit commands. You just have to give more information, not just the 12 and 24. But the neat thing that I love about these calculators, again, is you can look at things with so many different representations. So if you wanted to look at a graph of this, it's much easier to do parametrically, we found, than it is with a function, only because of window setting issues. And the directions on how to do this will be included in the files that are shared from this workshop. This is not at the website, but we created a document to share with you. So we're going to go to our parametric, and we're going to graph, let X be T, and the Y value will be the balance. So I could go back to the app and pick that up, or go to the catalog, either way. So we're choosing the balance. And the balance in terms of T, which is really the balance at X time. Now, the exciting thing about this is the window. We can set it up so that we're doing the entire, what was this one, Judy, 60 months?
Yes.
And the T step is crucial. So we're going to ask it to maybe compute it every 12 months. We want the
Yeah.
X's to be the same because they
Same.
were the same in the setup.
Yep.
We're going to put tick marks on the X-axis every 1 year. And thinking about the values we would need here, let's see, the loan was 19,000, so let's go up to 20,000. We always want students to think about what's an appropriate window.
Make Y min negative 1,000, maybe.
Okay, and maybe either 1,000 or 2,000 for
Yep.
the tick marks on the Y-axis. And we can leave a little bit of space in case we're doing any kind of tracing. So we kind of double check this. You can get in trouble only if the T step is not logical. And ta-da. Looks almost linear, but if you actually take the data point 0, 19,000 and 60, 0 and do a line and graph that line, it's very clear. It's not linear, and we've already proved that looking at our data. So the neat thing about the tracing here, we've got all of this information. We want to know what happens at the end of 1 year. We've got that. End of 2 years, we can trace. So as soon as you're in trace mode, just type in any value within the window and press enter. So we just thought it was a really neat representation. And also, just to add a little bit more excitement, many people forget that one of the mode settings for TI-84 is the graph table. Again, thinking about those multiple representations. So if we choose graph table and change our table settings to go by 12s instead of 1s, and then go back, we have a nice representation here. And if we press trace wherever you are on the tracing. And someone asked a question about depreciation. There is an entire activity on depreciation. So I don't see why that could not, something related to that could not be graphed in the Y1 and the X2, Y2. That would be a wonderful idea.
I mentioned that saying that one of the activities talks about several different types of depreciation. So I don't know why you couldn't grab them.
Exactly. Great idea. Okay. So that's, and again, that's done a little bit differently as far as balance goes and graphing, but it certainly can be done on the Nspire as well. So thanks to everybody for chiming in with all of that. Now, we wanted to look at one other thing related to compound interest. And for this particular one, we're going to look at an activity. Let me just slide this out of the way just a little bit. So this particular one, notice that we've got this deposit going on.
So instead of borrowing, now we're saving.
And the interesting thing too is that she's putting money into her account every month, but it's being compounded daily. So a little bit different setup. And there's several wonderful activities on annuities and also other investments, like how much would grandparents put into a fund so that at the end of X years, they'd have enough to send the child to college. So be sure to check all of those wonderful activities with that. So with this one, let us show this one to you fairly quickly. And we're going to go back to the Nspire. I'm still on a calculator page. Now I could open a new document, or I could simply go back to the finance app and change the numbers. It's always your call on that. If we simply go back to the finance option on the calculator page and the solver, and here we had still 5 years, so that's good.
That's correct, 4.88.
So we've got a different interest rate.
Yep.
Notice that they're paying us this interest rate instead of us paying them, so maybe that makes a difference. The present value 0, doesn't have any money in there to start with. And then she's putting in 100, correct?
Yep.
And she's putting it in every month, but it's being compounded every day, so 365 times per year. And it will let you do that. We'll leave the payments there at the end. And what we want to know is the future value of her money. So again, the TI-Nspire and the 84 both make this so easy to think about different things we could compute. And we do hope the money will come out to be positive. Great. So there again, she's putting the money in the bank, but the future value of the money coming back to her is positive. And if I just go to simply a different row, it does round it to 2 decimal places. Now, keep the 6781 sort of in your head. We had her putting the money in at the end of each period, at the end of each month. If we change that, because students always want to know, if we change that to the beginning of each month, let's see how that's going to affect her future value. Remember, it's 6781 approximately right now. So that would give her about $20 more, $19,900, $28 more perhaps. So a little bit more, putting the money in at the beginning instead of the end.
So not a lot of difference, but it wasn't a lot of money. I mean, well, it is a lot of money, but $100 a month and the interest rate is pretty small.
Yeah.
So you wouldn't expect for it to be too much difference.
Right. So that's some of the things we have looked at and enjoyed doing with the Finance Solver. And I'm going to go ahead and change this back to end, just because if we come back and use this again, then that would be good to have it back. End is the default. So if you don't do anything with some of the things that you do from the menus, if you don't put in beginning or end in some way, end is always going to be the default. Okay, and thanks again for all of the good thoughts in the chat. Now, this is something that Judy now found interesting. There was a whole lesson on effective annual rate and nominal rate. And it gave this interesting formula where you could compute it yourself if you didn't want the technology to do it, but we wanted the technology to do it. But the nominal rate is like the simple interest. If you put money in the bank and it's only paid interest once a year, that's your nominal rate. But more often, there are multiple compounding periods, like the one we just saw, 365, and that's M in this formula. And then the effective annual rate is what your real rate's going to be if it's compounded more often than once a year. So we thought that it was kind of interesting that this was another thing that this finance app would do for us. So we just took a simple problem that is included in the activities about what's better, simple interest of 6.15% or interest that's compounded quarterly, but it's 6% interest compounded quarterly. And it's really nice that students are going to have this wonderful tool to know that they're, number one, they can make intelligent decisions about this, and number two, that there is such a thing that should be considered. Those of us who are not finance majors probably haven't thought about a lot of these things. So if we're on either the 84 or Nspire, it works exactly the same way. I just going to the home screen, clear off what's there, and go back to our finance app. And what we're looking for here is to choose EFF. So we're computing the effective rate. And Judy, you'll need to remind me, please, about the numbers. So notice a little arrow. We want to switch something to an effective rate. So we were taking the
6%.
And it's compounded 4 times a year. And remember, we're going to compare this to simple interest of 6.15%.
So we want to know which one is the better one to choose.
And simple as this, the effective rate, if it's compounded 4 times a year at 6%, is slightly less than the simple interest of 6.15. And that works exactly the same way on the Nspire. And if you forget the syntax, it is in the activity online. But again, we can always go to our catalog on either the Nspire or the 84 and press the plus key here. It will just show up on the Nspire. and we need the nominal rate, which would be what it was if it didn't have any compounding periods but one, and the compounding period number with a comma separating them. So kind of really a neat little thing that we weren't so aware of. That's one of the activities at the website.
Okay, so now we're going to talk about future values of just annuities. And we know that this applies to all of you. We're going to look at a problem on the rich math teacher or the rich science teacher.
Okay,
So,
before we do that, something just came into the chat that I do want to mention. When we go up here to the EFF, someone put in that you can put the plus there and it goes straight to catalog help. Yep. Wonderful. Thank you for that reminder. I tend to forget that and go straight to the catalog. So again, she was saying when you're in the app, the finance app, and you want the syntax, just go ahead and press the plus there. It saves you going to the catalog. Thank you so much. Okay, so yes, if you've got your 84 or your Nspire handy and you'd like to try this one, and if you don't have either one available, just think about it a little bit. Here is a problem. And as Judy said, the rich mathematics teacher.
Which everyone is. So we would like you to try this on either platform and then put your quote answer in the chat. Then we'll do it on one of them. So again, on the 84, you're choosing that finance, very top when you go to apps. On the Nspire, you first do a calculator page and go down to finance. We need some music.
That's right. Maybe you could, or you could get out a piggy bank and start putting quarters in it for the cha-ching kind of sound. Yeah. You ain't got any solutions here for us?
Don't be afraid.
All right, a little over $50,000, Shanna says. And if we think about it, if they put in like $4,000 a year for 10 years, we're looking at 40,000 right there. So we would hope it would be more than that. Okay, getting some very similar answers. Wonderful. That's always happy. So,
all right, so let's show it, Betty, real quick, maybe on the 84.
Yeah, because I'm going to do the amortization table on the Nspire. So we'll do this one more on the 84. So we had, let's see, 40 months, is 40. That correct?
Yep.
And 4.5%?
Correct.
Thanks.
PV of 0.
It could be, okay.
Payment of negative 1,000.
Okay.
Since they're giving that.
Putting that into the bank, great. We don't know the future value.
And then those two are both 4.
Okay. And we left it at the end. And we're going to go alpha solve again. Whoop.
Uh-oh.
What did I put in wrong?
I
was on the wrong row. And that happens often. And the happy thing is no harm because we just go and do alpha solve again. There we go. The $50,166. Great.
That's what people got.
Yep. Thanks for chiming in with that. Now, one thing that was very interesting to Judy and me is that as much as we love this finance solver, there are other ways to compute these values. So, for example, if we want the future value, which is what we were solving for there, we can go back to finance and come down here, time, value of money, future value. And we had that wonderful, wonderful reminder a minute ago. We can just press the plus here. Oh, and you think, oh my gosh, the syntax, there's a lot of stuff. I'd really rather use the solver, which we certainly would. But we just wanted to let you know that if you did not use a solver, and I'm going to just choose paste and put that on the home screen. If you did not use the solver, we can just put in the values. They just have to be put in the correct order. It's a number of payments that you put in, the interest rate, the value you started with, and I had this written down, obviously, or I could not have done this, and the payment, and the compounding periods. And remember, the default is end.
So we don't have to put that in.
Hopefully, if I typed everything in correctly, we do get that 50,166. So it's an alternative. And so all of those particular values that we've been solving for could be done in this way. But it's really kind of nice to have the finance solver, because there the students really see everything together, and it gives them a chance to easily go and change things. No, I thank you for asking that. The reason I didn't have to put in a placeholder for future values that I chose this future value command. So it's asking it to solve for the future value. Thank you for bringing that up. That's a great question. Okay, now we know that many of you, if you have ever done a home loan, that you were given an amortization table. It was not a matter of you constructing one. You just simply were usually given one by the bank. So we want to do a problem with you and show you how easy that is to do on the TI-Nspire. It's a little bit different on the 84, but explicit directions for the 84 are at the website in the amortization activity for the 84. And for the 84, it can either be done with, what am I trying to say, Judy? Function tables or list.
Or list, yeah.
Both ways you can do it. And this is the one we're going to look at now for the amortization table. Let me give you a few seconds to look over this. Now, what's the unnerving thing to students, I'm sure, and to all of us here, is the issue of the 20% down, and they'd have to think about that. We just had a question in the chat related to the 84. Was that when you were in the finance solver itself? Yes, so if you put in everything you want to put in, and let's pretend this future value is 0 before we got here. So it was the, with the teacher, it was the 40 months because of 10 years and putting in the money 4 times a year. So to find the future value, we simply go to that row and we press alpha followed by enter for solve. Just be sure you're on the future value row in this example. Okay, thank you. And there are many, many activities like that in those activities at the website. So we do encourage you to look at some of those, especially ones you may not have looked at before, like sinking funds. That was an interesting one to us. Okay, for the amortization table, so what we're going to do, we're borrowing the money for 30 years, so we could either multiply or just put in the 360. Interest rate, Judy, was 8%, is that right?
Yes. Yes.
Here, what you can do, if you choose to, you can have the students actually type 249,000, don't put in the comma, and subtract the 20% down payment that supposedly has been made.
Good number sense.
Yes. And Judy and I would actually prefer that they just multiply 249,000 by 0.8, but that's a whole nother day. So you can discuss that with them as well. And hopefully when I press tab, that works out okay. Should be 199,200. Okay, so we want the future value of this loan certainly to be 0. We're making 12 payments a year, compounding 12 times a year.
Right.
And at the end of the month, we'll leave it like that. Now, the thing about the amortization table, you need to do these computations first so they can be stored for these variables. So we need our payment, shocking as it may be, and that is the monthly payment. And it's rounded there, but they do keep all of the values. Now, to do the amortization table itself, and by the way, I have done this on the calculator. I thought at first, well, it's going to show up great on the software, but what about the calculator, the handheld? And it does great. So escape to exit the finance solver. You're back on the calculator page, and we're going to go to menu, back to finance, and this time come into amortization. And when we choose that, we see the first option is an amortization table. So we'll choose that. Now, for the syntax, it is really similar to the syntax we used a minute ago. But right here, it clearly shows you need the number of payments you want to have computed. If you only want the first year, it would be 12. The actual number of payments there are, interest, present value, payment, future value, and compounding. And right here, if you arrow down, you do not have to put in payment at, end, or beginning because the default is end, and the rounding value we don't need to worry about. So that's the syntax, and it's listed in those lessons. You don't have to go and look it up. The lessons give you the syntax. So we're going to put in, we want the entire 360 months of our amortization table. Now, here's the kind of a neat thing. Since we computed all of this on the TI-84, it was stored in the variables of the app. But here it's stored in our variables right here. So the first thing I needed is the number of months. Now, I could type in 360. First 360 is how many rows of the table do I want, or how many months of the table. But I can also select all of these variables that have been done in the app section from the variable. There's our interest, could have typed in the 8%. And then
present value.
Present value, is that the next one?
Yes.
Okay. So there's present value. And
Payment.
Payment. And again, any of these numbers that you just know right off the top of your head, you could just simply type it in, which I'm going to do with the next one. I want my final value to be 0. And I know it was compounded. There were 12 payments a year, rather. And it was compounded 12 times a year. So,
you ready?
Drum roll.
That's right.
And here is our amortization table. Now let's think what we have. Month 0, we owe the entire amount. Now, how much money is going to interest and how much to principal, would you say, here on that first row? Kind of scary. And then as we go down, notice the first row, remember, is the month. As we go down, the amount going to interest, which is the second column here, is decreasing, and the amount going to the principal is increasing. It's still rather frightening how long it takes before they're fairly well balanced as far as your monthly payment going to interest and principal. So as some of you have said in the chat many times, this is something that students are just simply not aware of. And not only that, they're not aware of the fact that if we take 360 and multiply it by the payment here, remember we borrowed what, 199,200?
Mm-hmm.
It's a little bit unnerving.
Wow.
But the nice thing, again, about both of these calculators, the Nspire and the 84, is that we can see all of this. We can graph it. We can look at it numerically and graphically, and we can talk about number sense with students and trying to help them become better financial consumers. Anyone questions about this? Again, this is different on the 84, but the activity at the website explains it thoroughly. And we do
Betty,
encourage you
yeah,
to go back to
go
these
back
lessons.
to the website, yeah, and just kind of look at these lessons. And what we did was we pulled various things, changed some numbers, but you can see what the titles are. And so if you do want to do something more with the 84 on amortization, right there it is.
Thanks, Eric, for putting the website in there. But if you ever forget that and ever lose that link, just go to education.ti.com and go under the educators section and you'll get right to it there. Okay, thank you. Any other questions for the chat? I think we're getting fairly close.
We are. Perfect timing.
Really appreciate everybody chiming in and sharing. Thank you. Dale, do you have some wrap-up things to share with them?
I do. Thank you so much, Betty and Judy. I agree that this is very eye-opening, and I think it's something that that not only adults but students need to know. And that number of what they paid for that condo at the end is shocking.
Oh, it is.
Yeah. So thank you so much for sharing the resources, for walking through and showing both technologies for that. I'm sure everybody appreciated it. I want to thank all the attendees for your participation also. It's great to have the participation in there and have your reactions and your questions and such. Reminder that the resources and the recordings will be available later this week. From the website, you'll get an email with links to it, as well as a link to a certificate for participating in this live session. The last thing I have is that we have every session we have a winner of a graphing calculator of their choice. And today for this session, the winner, and I hope I'm pronouncing her name right, is Pam Bene. So Pam, we will reach out to you. We have your email and we'll reach out to you to ask which calculator you like and get more information. So thank you all.
Yay,
And
Pam.
I really appreciate you guys coming in. Have a great afternoon. Thanks for participating with the T-Cubed, the virtual T-Cubed International Conference, and have a great rest of your weekend. Thank you.
Thanks
Thanks, everybody.
Enjoy being with you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.